Transformation doesn't have to be complex. There are great opportunities for distributors who are willing to take advantage of a new approach to enterprise technologies and organizational structures. Being able to rapidly respond to market changes and emerging customer needs requires flexible organizations and flexible technologies. By adopting a new approach to enterprise architectures and embracing headless and scalable technology stacks, businesses can transform by doing. Introduce composable MACH architectures to increase speed, agility, and responsiveness, and enable connecting all channels and touchpoints into a seamless experience in which customers can easily switch between channels. Create a winning digital innovation system with a digital ambition in line with corporate strategy, clear governance structures, and simple criteria to make the right decisions that can be used by small, autonomous teams working in a fast-paced and outcome-focused way. Leverage advanced analytics, digital design, and technology platforms for developing a new value proposition, go-to-market strategies, and business models, creating a long-term relationship with your target customers. Define your future-proof value proposition, business model, and the channels supporting your customer vision. Enable a smooth customer journey across touchpoints with the right flexible technologies and architectures. Capture and analyze customer data in real time for a personalized experience, and make sure all your employees are aware and understand the change. Develop a collaborative mindset and start working together across functions in an agile manner. Think big and start small, and remain successful in the distribution revolution.
Good morning to you all, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which time zone you're in, and welcome to another webinar around the distribution revolution. In contrast to the previous 3 episodes, and if you checked in a little bit earlier, you've seen the wrap-up video of the last episode of the Distribution Revolution webinar series. This time we will do a deep dive into one specific client case. And for this client case, we invited for you 3 engaging and very knowledgeable panel members, existing of Kevin Baum, product manager for digital commerce at Dot Foods. We invited Chris Purcell, product strategy manager at Episerver, and we invited our own Casper Rasmussen, technical director at Valtech. Welcome to you all, to all 3 of you. And in today's webinar, we will show the relevance and often necessity of business transformation for companies dealing with a lot of legacy systems and processes, and what it takes to run a successful business transformation. We also explain to you how we approach this with Dot Food and what we learned from it and where Dot Food is right now. At the end of the session, there will be time to answer a couple of questions. So I want to invite you to add them to the chat so that we don't forget to answer them at the end. So, Chris and Casper, before we do a deep dive into Dot Foods, can you briefly elaborate on what you see happening in the market and why business transformation is important in today's market?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steffi. Hi, I'm Chris Purcell, product strategist at Episerver. Yeah, what's going on in the market is something we've talked about for years, but this 2020 has actually seen it come to a major fruition. Everyone's been talking about digitally transforming their business. Every company worth their salt has got a digital strategy or a business transformation strategy in place to a lesser or greater extent. But the fact is that, as we've seen during 2020, and I'm not going to use the C word during this presentation, but digital has become the preeminent way that you are going to interact with your customers. There's no 2 ways about it. The in-person stuff that we had before, yes, it's coming back. We actually came out of lockdown 2 here in the UK yesterday. I haven't still made it to the barbers yet, but that in-person stuff is coming back. But what we are seeing is this greater shift towards a digital business model. And that's what it is. Digital is now your business. It can't just be an arm to your bow. It's got to be one of the areas you think about absolutely wholly and totally. And these are just some of the things that various organizations have spotted over the course of this year. We've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation take place in 2 months. Okay, now that might not be your business, but if it's not your business, it probably is your competitor's business. Okay, and I'm not here to scaremonger anyone or anything like that, but that pace of change has just accelerated exponentially over the course of the last 9-10 months. We've seen e-commerce spending up 18% in the US. Over half of all sales in the UK were online in the course of June. And these are some pretty huge shifts that we're seeing here. So that's what I'm saying. The strategy is, and the trend is, and it's only been accelerated by 2020, is that you really need to think about digital as your business, not just a string to what you're doing.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that while digital is your business, we just need to recognize as well that everything is about the customer itself. Like in everything every business do as they apply digital, the customer needs to come first. We typically see that in both inward and outward facing areas of focus. Like think about how you need to enable your organization. Think about how you across business, across people and organization, across ways of working, need to really embrace digital, really need to understand your audiences and users, and everything you do needs to be a reflection of that. Also in the outward facing areas, like your actual technology, your data, your customer centricity mindset, like how you do analysis and research around your audiences and your personas, all of that need to root in your actual customers. So what is important in 2020? The customer is, in our experience and in our opinion, and I think the intro said it very well, experience-driven design is something that we all need to embrace going forward.
Okay. Kevin, can you first tell us a little bit about Dot Foods, and next explain what the transformation was about for you and why you actually started it?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steffi. So a little bit about Dot. So we use this term called redistribution to describe our work. What that means is we sit between manufacturers and points of distribution, helping those two marketplace participants do business together better. So we are distributor to distributors. Customers for Dot look like food service distributors, grocery distributors, mass market, hypermarket distributors. We don't actually go to restaurants. We don't actually go to convenience stores. We don't actually go to grocery stores, but we serve the points of distribution that help those stores run. As part of that, though, we've become over about 60 years an $8 billion business globally. We serve all 50 US states. We serve 39 countries on a weekly basis. And we carry about 134,000 products in the catalog. So it's grown into a big business, all focused on supply chain. As part of this business, though, over the years, Dot delivered an e-commerce environment starting back in 1997. And so that e-commerce environment grew over the years to become a $500 million piece of business. The interesting thing was we actually weren't paying attention to it. We just saw it as a thing that existed. We saw ourselves as a supply chain company, and the e-commerce site was just a thing that we served. And so when I got asked to move into this position and start trying to understand what it could be, we'd actually never measured the revenue that the website generated. And the first time we measured it, we saw a $480 million piece of business that literally didn't have an owner. And so that kind of got the executive team's attention, but started this kind of process that we're really in year 3 of right now. But the other thing that was interesting and was occurring was we were in a market that felt very insular. We felt isolated. We felt insulated from disruption. There had been attempts at disruption over the years, usually from new entrants, right? People doing really strange things that didn't follow the path of the normal industry participants. And we thought, you know, we actually think that's going to happen, right? Why would this industry be any different from what's happened to everything else in the marketplace? And so we decided to get a little bit more proactive about it, and we saw that we needed to do something different. The thing that really got people's attention was in June 2017 when Amazon bought Whole Foods. They immediately became a significant player in food supply chain because along with all the stores that Amazon acquired from Whole Foods, they got 3 million square feet of food storage space, which immediately grew their footprint in the food storage market significantly. So the thing that we saw happening within a year was that 40% of operators were ordering at least monthly from Amazon. And the more maybe scary thing was that 55% of food manufacturers didn't have a clear e-com strategy. And so we saw that as kind of fuel for the fire that we were already kindling a little bit on our own to keep things going. For sure, the distribution market in the food space was slow and maybe opposed to disruption and change, but the buyers in the food market, the restaurants, the grocery stores, the places where we all go to get the food that we like, they were ready for something different. And so we decided to activate something that would help us participate in that change. The thing that this all ended up in was this statement. The chairman of the company, one of the family members, the founding family that still owns the business after 60 years, as we were debating what we might do and how this might work, he actually said, I don't care what the revenue of the site is, I just want to be the most relevant website in the food industry. And so the way that we hear that, or the way that I think about that is my job, my responsibility to the company is to be the website that if your job is to buy food, we want to be the place you go. And so that's really what this whole path has been about, is hopefully giving John what he asked us to give him back in 2017.
Well, that sounds like a hell of a job, and also a really cool objective. So maybe looking at that, and Casper and Chris, I think you've been around from the start of this project. And maybe Chris, you can elaborate a little bit on what it takes to run such a program, because this was a massive vision for dog food. So how?
Yeah, and I think Casper talked about it at the beginning. We were talking about experience, being the most relevant website in the industry is really around being able to deliver that experience that the customers are after. Every one of us has had a great online experience. There's a website we've gone to, a brand we've interacted with, where we've had a great joined up experience, and that is, to us, in our mind, solidifies the thought around that's where I'll go when I need to buy food, when I need to buy clothes. We've all got these websites that brands we interact with, and focusing on experience, particularly in the times we're in at the moment, is a proven track record. Okay, focusing on your customers and focusing on delivering the experience that they want and how they want to interact with you. Back in 2008, we saw the last crisis. Now, I don't want to put this year in terms of a crisis, but it is people, the companies and the businesses who focused on the experience of their customers did 3 times better than those that didn't when we were trying to get out of that time. And that was a clear, proven strategy. And we've seen it ourselves with many of our customers, Dog Foods and many others. Engagement up with your customers 70%, conversions up 43%. And this is just from being able to build websites or digital experiences around that customer, around how they want to interact with you, and how they have grown up with these heightened expectations. Okay, and I guess kind of the question around how do you do that? How do you build on a platform for that? Is that you really have to have a digital experience platform like Dog Foods have, that put the customer at the center of absolutely everything. Okay, every interaction your customer has with you, there's data around that. There's points you can track. There's information that you can glean from these customers. And it's not about, and a lot of companies do this, it's not about going, okay, I can now target these customers better. I can now personalize to them better. And of course, absolutely you can. But what you want to be doing is you want to be thinking about what are their needs, what are their wants, what is it they want to get from you, not what your goals are, which is to sell more stuff, but what is their goals, why are they coming to you? And then you can create an experience around what their goals actually are, and that is going to get that heightened engagement, that heightened sense of relevance that Kevin was looking for, and being able to surface up those yes, you're doing targeting, yes, you're doing personalization, but you're actually thinking about their needs rather than your own. I think that whole mindset is key to having a great strategy when it comes to putting in a digital transformation project.
Yeah, and while technology and platform need to be available, you also need to find ways of enabling and actually applying that to solve for the right problems, right? And we see three key pillars in doing that. We see that experimentation is critical. You need to basically embrace the experimenting way of working within your organization. Everything cannot be static. The mass communication of the past, where B2B companies went to customer types 1, 2, and 3, does no longer exist when you're talking about customer centricity, because you're starting to actually talk to the individual and what that individual is looking to get from your business. Experimentation is a way for you to optimize that experience in an ongoing manner, instead of always relying on deep static research upfront and kind of relying on that as the Bible. That is not the right mentality to apply. On the other hand, there also needs to be some type of risk acceptance, because with experimentation comes failure at times. And that risk acceptance needs to be across your organization. It needs to be in your senior executive leadership. It needs to be in the actual content teams, that people are doing their best. And at the end of the day, you will see a higher ROI. You will see your KPIs actually spiking, which is ultimately what you're looking for. And then you need to look at agility also being a part of it. The rapid change to market requires that you can also deploy to market very, very quick. You need to work in iterations. You need to work in bite-sized chunks in the way you actually break down your programs and the way you actually deliver value to your customers. And that is something that a platform like Episerver can easily enable across all of those three core pillars of customer centricity.
Okay. Makes sense. Thinking about these three guiding principles, experimentation, risk acceptance, agility, that all fuel customer centricity. Kevin, can you explain in that regard, what were your biggest barriers and how did you go about it and where did you actually start?
Yeah, we definitely bought into the concepts that Casper and Chris have shared. But we did have some pretty notable barriers to it. The three biggest things that really prevented us from doing this before, right? So before we knew these things, before we had Epi as a platform, were old business rules, right? We were a 60-year-old company. We had lots of specific ways of doing things, high efficiency as a supply chain company, right? High volume, low margins, very little room for error, or else you don't make any money on the transaction. So we had lots of business rules that had just been there for a long time, and we actually didn't remember why they were there. And so I often refer to them as myths. Was a barrier for us. We had legacy tooling. You know, we were on the cutting edge in the distribution space, at least in 1997 when we launched our first website. And in 97, you built everything from scratch. There wasn't a platform. And that's what we were still running. We still actually have that application running for some customers today, with code going back 20 plus years. But that legacy tooling made it really hard to pivot and be agile in our thinking. And then I personally, and then we as a team, had weak prioritization skills. I came from the sales organization. I love being in front of customers. I get energized by hearing what their problems are. And that was a challenge because I hated saying no. And that led to all of us thinking everything was important. And really, when we stack those three things up, right, these myths and this old tooling that made everything look like a big bet, right? I wanted to put a guided navigation on the screen as an example. For 20 years, we didn't have guided navigation, and I wanted to do it, but it was a multi-month effort to get it done, right? And so it became a big bet. We have a team of developers, and they're not cheap, and so it was just a barrier. And it ended up in us being stuck. We were literally frozen with unsure just what to do. And we were kind of unsure of how to get out of it. So the way that we approached getting out of it, though, was by picking partners and picking new tools that helped us specifically overcome those barriers. And one of the things that I had to acknowledge was that as an insider at Dot, I've been at the company for almost 18 years now. I was an insider. And while I might be able to talk the talk, right, I could nod my head when somebody like Casper or Chris would talk about the things we need to do, agility and experimentation. And I'd bring those topics up with senior executives. They would literally come back and look at me and go, makes sense, but how do you know it's going to work? And I didn't, because I'd never done it, and I didn't have that experience. So for those of you on the call today that like are having those types of conversations where you can see it and your senior leaders even see it, but you can't figure out how to activate it, what we found worked for us was bringing in credible partners, because the exterior or the external experience that they had couldn't be argued by me or the senior leadership team. They could go, okay, yes, we've seen it work. There's a case study. There's real in production revenue generating work that looks like this that is real. And so for us, selecting an agency and partners that could help us get over that hump was a big deal. Once we got past that, though, it came to actually evaluating ourselves and what we were capable of doing. And there were a couple of key examples that probably stick with this group or with this concept is we run our system on an AS400. It's an old IBM I, runs a lot of custom built COBOL applications. That is not going anywhere. We also had a deep team of .NET based developers, and that meant that the tooling that we wanted to build on top of needed to be a .NET based application. And so that quickly helped us focus on the platforms that were in play and exclude the ones that weren't. And then it really got down to thinking about processes, right? So we've talked about people and we've talked about the tools, and we didn't really understand our processes. And so being able to like dig deep into the processes that we had and be honest about where we were, that example of poor prioritization skills from the previous slide, I think kind of fit here. But really evaluating those things. And at the end of the day, it's really hard to be our own therapist, right? None of us are really good at like digging deep into our own problems and really addressing them. We need help, right? It'd be great if we all saw a therapist. And in this instance, as a business, as an organization, we needed a couple of therapists to help us. The thing though that it all wraps up in is like, as an enterprise with capital tied to this project, making sure that we're making good financial decisions on behalf of the company, meaning that we needed to like check references. And so that was the thing that we did both on Valtech and on Episerver, and it was talking to real customers in the wild that have been using the partners and the tools to do things like we wanted to do. The one like thing that was helpful here was that we went outside our industry. So just like I said earlier, the food distribution market is very insular. Learning from other industries is really valuable for us. So we needed to be open to seeing what Valtech and Episerver clients in different industries were doing and how that might transfer to our applications. But that was a big deal. Being an enterprise isn't a bad thing, but activating it takes an open mind and partners that have experience. And we didn't have that in 2017. So that eventually led us to defining who we are. So lots of conversations. This definitely sounds like fluffy marketing speak to me. This is not the type of thing that I like, but it actually does make sense because we've referenced it. We want the website to be the digital representation of who Dot is in the marketplace, who our customers think we are, and who the customers we want expect us to be. So we want the website to be just like our high quality customer service people. We want the website to feel like talking to your sales rep. And that really does come out in this statement. We wanted to sit in the middle, facilitating both customer experiences, but also activating our sales and customer service teams too. We want to use digital experiences to help our customer service and sales people do better work. And then that even led into another set of principles, and these things we did use quite a bit. So 3 core things that we wanted to do. We wanted to get better at communicating. We wanted to digitize manual, non-digital experiences, and we wanted to scale the behaviors and experiences that our employees deliver for customers and suppliers every day, but we can't work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We just don't have enough bodies, and we never will. And so communicating was all about telling customers as early as possible when something wasn't going to work. That's a spot that they've told us they wish we did better at. Some customers distrust us because they feel like we're holding things back. And so we wanted to use digital platforms to get over that hump. We wanted to build their confidence in their relationship with us. We wanted to use digital to reduce the friction that it takes to do business with Dot. Being an old company, again, high volume, low margin, digital, we often test things out with humans. Like we will throw a bunch of bodies against something for a short period of time, and if it works, great. We'll like hire a single body to do that one thing forever. That's not fun. And so what we wanted to do is do those same types of experiments, but to reduce the friction of doing business with that, but do it without adding as many bodies as we had been in the past, just because we can't afford it over time. And then really enabling customers to discover more of what we do. So our salespeople do great personal selling, but the reality is we all, as salespeople, would avoid trouble customers, right? Customers that we thought were going to tell us no, we would never even ask them if they would buy something from us. Well, digital doesn't care, right? Digital is not emotional. And so we wanted to use digital to help deliver that ask, right, to all the customers, even the ones that normally tell us no and shut the door. Digital is not going to get scared and cold feet and not even pick up the phone and make the call. So these were the 3 core concepts. Where this was really helpful is when there wasn't a clear action to take, right? We had, well, option A looks good and option B looks good and option C looks good. We couldn't quite get our heads around which one to do. We would actually come back to these principles and go, which one of these principles is more activated by the options? And that's the option that we picked. So the last thing, and this is where it got hard, I personally have learned a ton doing this work about navigating opportunities. You know, I personally had weak prioritization skills. As a team, we didn't have the skills that we needed. And the reality was we had a huge amount of things to pick from to do. And we didn't really know what to do first. So a couple of things that partners have led us through, Casper specifically has been in the middle of some of these deep, heated conversations that we've had over the past couple of years. But the very first thing that I think is important, and we've learned this and didn't work this way at the beginning, was we have to assume the best of our peers. You know, I'm on the product side at Dot. I have peers on the technology side. There are developers that have been in the business for a long time. And often we would collide, right? We would see things differently, and we saw that difference as a negative instead of seeing it as a positive. But it all comes back to assuming that our peers have the best intention of our work, the project, the company at heart. And getting over that hump makes the rest of this actually go a lot easier. It makes the conflict healthy rather than negative, and that's a big deal. Getting into healthy conflict versus negative conflict or unhealthy conflict is a really powerful thing. The next thing, though, was establishing KPIs. Like, we wanted to be able to prove our experiments worked or didn't, right? So sometimes the KPIs are really big and easy. Like for us, something might be like recurring traffic, right? How many returning visitors do we have, and how does that compare to what we had before? Sometimes, though, it's really, really granular. How many people followed through with actually returning a product they requested an RMA on? So it just depends on what the thing you're trying to test is, what your KPIs are, but keep those KPIs in mind as you're establishing what you're going to do. We've literally chosen not to do experiments because we didn't have a scalable, trustworthy way to measure our outcomes, and we decided not to run that test. Definitely, like I mentioned a couple slides ago, leveraged partner experience. I mean, Valtech has lots of various customers. Episerver has lots of various customers that do very different things from Dot. But one of the gifts that I have working for the company I do is I get to go learn from those things, and Valtech and Epi help bring those types of inputs to us. And so leverage the partner to bring their experience into this space. Data helps. You know, we have tons of transactional data. We transact about 10,000 transactions a week with an average number of line items, roughly 200 line items per transaction. and we go back 5 years. So we have reams of transactional data for thousands of purchases across the world. But at the end of the day, customer conversations were as enlightening as the data. The data might help us understand which direction to go, but the customer conversations would actually help us decide what to do once we got there. So both are important. Don't discount either one. The one that we had never really leveraged was the customer conversation, and that came in loud and clear. We pivoted. One big bet that I was wanting to make, I was just dead sure that what I wanted to do was right. And once we presented it for customers to provide some usability feedback, they said, that's dumb, I don't like that. And we switched and we changed and we got something better, and customers like it now. So customer conversations are important. And then this last one, I talked about the myths, right? The myth and legend that exists within our organizations, right? That's just always the way it's been done. This is where, we as project leaders, as maybe advocates internally for digital transformation, probably already think this way, right? We all look at our own companies and go, why in the world do we do it this way? This is where partners with external experience help us push against our own peers, again, in different business units, to really dig into why do we do it the way we do. So, push against assumptions, push against the myth that exists around why you do things the way you do, because often you'll find out that it doesn't actually matter anymore, right? It made sense 20 years ago, made sense 10 years ago. In the way the world works today, it might have made sense 3 months ago, but it doesn't make sense today. So use your partners, challenge those assumptions, use them to accelerate your own challenging of the business rules that you guys have internally. And then, Casper, you might jump in. I don't know if you want to say, you've lived through some of those arguments with us. I don't know if you have an opinion on navigating the opportunities since you've done that with us for the past couple of years.
No, definitely. And where I wanted to start was just to echo the word hard, because it was a difficult exercise. And I think it's difficult for the majority of our customers because you can see that the stakes are high, you can see the ambitions are great, and it's extremely difficult to translate that into something that's actionable and executable, and even something that is in these bite-sized chunks that you actually can break down and start to design and actually understand. Right, so what we ended up doing in the very beginning, and I would say that was even prior to this exercise of true prioritization that Kevin spoke about, was the mission statement was defined. That's the one you guys saw a few minutes ago. We started then deriving core characteristics that we wanted this experience to basically embody. Think about this experience as being a human. We wanted to elevate the presence of Dot in the digital space. We wanted to bring a human-centric experience to life that Dot's customers could actually engage with. So it had a ton of human characteristics that we wanted to kind of associate to it. And then we started to talk about digital capabilities. We started to talk about digital problems, and those ultimately translated into epics that we could start to really associate and quantify business value and user value to. And at the end of the day, you're sitting with, I would say, a somewhat digestible quadrant of opportunities, some opportunities that are worthy to pursue, some opportunities that are only complementary to your mission, and then you start to get a sense of where you need to start. And I would say the KPI aspect of what Kevin said is really, really critical. Each and every single stakeholder, including your senior executives, need to align on what we're looking to achieve. What dials are we looking to push inside of the organization? Is this purely a revenue play? Is it a margin play? Is it an operational efficiency play? That needs to be understood, because the way you apply digital to these types of solutions differ very much based on what it is you're ultimately looking to realize on behalf of your organization. So that exercise was critical for us to define that true north for what it is we want to do. And then we really started to prioritize against it in a proactive way. The last thing I wanted to call out was the make space for your legacy roles and assumptions. Some of those epics, please make sure you double click on them, because there are hidden surprises and there are holy cows in most businesses that's been around for a very, very long time. The businesses that are not digital native, there are always holy cows sitting inside of that operation. And that is something that's extremely important. So please make sure you make space to double click on some of those epics, but also please make sure you don't turn it into a waterfall exercise. There needs to be room for assumptions, because again, the agile mindset, where you actually do this in increments and start to realize value and validate your hypothesis as you go, is very, very helpful to get the wheels moving on your project as well.
So the last part, and Casper, I think, will be able to really help talk about the technology side of what this slide talks to. But I mentioned the piles of legacy data that we have and piles of transactional data that we continue to build every day as we do business through the market. Legacy isn't necessarily bad, right? Legacy is legacy. Legacy has gotten a lot of us to where we are. So what we didn't want to do, and what this was never about, was like burning down what existed before. It was about transforming it and leveraging it so that we meet the expectations of today and tomorrow. And so as we deployed Episerver as the platform, as we started acting more agile, and in a more agile mindset, we didn't want to just eliminate the legacy data. We did want to leverage it. It's super valuable. It's one of the things that customers have always asked us for better access to, is like, hey, I have all this transactional history with you. Help me use it to make my business better. And so we really wanted to activate that throughout this project. And so in doing that, we needed to think about activating that, experimenting with it, figuring out what we could do with it. But we also had this $8 billion and growing business that depended on that operational data. That same operational data that I was trying to get to experiment with was also the same system, the same data that made this big business run day in, day out. And so me wanting to experiment with it, our team wanting to experiment with it, was risky, right? We could have potentially pulled the plug accidentally on the operational systems through some of our experimentation. The other thing, though, that was a reality was, because of the systems it was in, I mean, I'm sure most of us would struggle to name a COBOL developer that we know. So finding ways to activate and access data in our operational systems was really hard. It was a big reason we'd never done it. And so what ended up happening was a microservices architecture that wraps around our legacy environments helps us achieve both goals. It helps us go faster, be more agile, experiment, and it also insulates our core operational systems from that experimentation. So it's both enabling and insulating. We've learned a ton. It hasn't been easy by any means. Casper can attest to that. But building this microservices architecture is what is going to help us do what we want to do for the next 5 to 10 years. And it also keeps the operational systems of the business safe from that experimentation and transformation. So think what your legacy data can do for you, and then think how you leverage it, but also protect it, because you need to do both. And that's been the case for us.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that was a very well description of the barriers that lots of similar companies to you experience, and also how you approached it and what is important in a successful transformation. Right now we're taking another 5 minutes to talk against this, and then feel free to use those last 5 minutes, all of you who are listening and watching this, to take the last 5 minutes to add questions to the chat. We are skipping a big part of the project, and we are actually jumping to the now. So where are you now? What did you learn? What would you definitely do again in the same way? And what would you never do in the same way?
Sure.
Maybe you can talk against that a little bit.
Yeah, so an interesting thing, and we were kind of talking about planning and preparation a moment ago before the session, but so we had big plans. We were actually going to turn the site on and start welcoming users to the new site the week of 20 March this year. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. Like Chris said, I'm not going to use the C word either. But the pandemic hit literally 5 days before we were going to activate the site and start welcoming customers to it. And we decided to pause that because no matter how good a job we'd done, we knew it would be disruptive to the muscle memory that customers have with our old site, right? Our website acts as an operational tool for them. And so we were going to disrupt that a little bit, and they were going to have to relearn some things, even with all the great work that we did in design and building this thing. So we paused that actually for about 5 months. We actually just sat back and kind of let the market settle down. Here in the US, at least, you know, the food service market, which accounts for about 80% of our revenue, was literally down 90% in April. And so the market was just in complete disarray. And so we slowly started activating the site. We changed our approach to activating the site. We took a much more conservative, scaled out approach. We didn't just open it up to everybody at the same time. And we're actually still in that kind of cautious, conservative process. But one of the cool things that happened was when the market dropped out, of course, our revenue and our velocity dropped almost overnight. And so within about 3 weeks, our sales had dropped about 60%. And so we had a bunch of inventory sitting around that we needed to get rid of. We also had a bunch of products that actually met the new need of the market related to the pandemic. We sell things like cleaners and gloves and masks and all kinds of things that are used in food environments for safety. But we didn't think that we were meeting the market's needs or our needs to move product to keep the business running. And so one of the things that Casper and I huddled up on was, you know, what could we do? Can we do something with what we've built? Like we have a website that's ready to go. It's behind an authentication wall. We've never had a public facing experience for our products. Is there something we can do? And what was cool about it was what we had built behind this authentication wall. Within one sprint, 2 weeks, we turned it into an open public facing site that, while it didn't blow the doors off, we've sold about $2 million worth of product through it, but it proved the value of platforms and agile thinking, in that we were able to go from nothing publicly facing one day to 2 weeks later, a public facing site that's helped us move some inventory that we needed to move, has helped customers discover more about what we sell. So while we're still, you know, in the process of migrating all of our customers over, the approach and the platform has already proved its value to our senior leadership, and that we were able to pivot and start moving inventory during the pandemic that we otherwise had no outlet for. We were literally going to throw it away and just, it was going to be money lost. And so it's been that in itself has proven the value. So a couple things that, you know, Steph, you asked, like, what would we do again and what would we maybe not do? I actually really like the way we went about evaluating partnerships. We're a conservative company to begin with, and we took a conservative approach to picking platforms and partners. We hired a partner just to help us evaluate platforms. We talked to lots of different partners that looked at the platform, that developed on the platforms that we worked with, but that also involved evaluating ourselves and finding somebody that could help us, you know, meet us where we are and take us to where we wanted to go. For sure, prioritize experimentation as you're selecting technology. That is a big deal for us now. It will be in the future, and we didn't have it before. We're investing in it now. I can't imagine a business that wants to be more than digital enough, right? Digital enough is a thing, but if you want to be more than digital enough and you want to be digitally enabled, experimentation and risk taking have to be built into your technology. And then talking to real customers as part of your work. We definitely did not want to just rebuild what we had before on Episerver with new graphical elements and a new UI. We wanted to completely rethink the experience, and talking to customers helped us understand which parts of the experience that existed before were really broken and needed their attention. So those are the things that I would say do again. One big thing that I wouldn't do again, Steffi, is, and this was my fault, it's totally my decision, is the approach we took to actually doing development focused on the most complex things first. We started off trying to build the product detail page of the e-commerce environment, and highly complex, lots of integrations to the microservices environment, lots of concurrent dependencies. And at the end of the day, that was wrong. We should have started with the core user flow. We hadn't talked to customers yet. We didn't really understand what they did when they used the site. And once we talked to them, about 3 months in, I learned, like, the light bulb went off for me, and I realized that I'd made a big mistake. And so that conversation with customers up front to help understand what's the core function they need to do is where development should have started. And that was a mistake that I made, and I will not make it again.
I'm happy that you say that, Kevin. We're trying to tell that to every single customer. Start off there, but it's always difficult to do that. Thank you for that.